We want to spend a little bit of time talking about the mechanics of the session, how things function in an office, what goes on. How do you make a difference in a legislator's office whenever, not just when the session's going on, but in general? And I would suspect that the first thing to do is to try to build a relationship with that person.
Absolutely. This was my first session that I worked down in Austin for Representative Dwayne Burns, and one of the, I guess, most overwhelming things is I basically had a meeting every 15 minutes. So if I could have put a turnstile on the front door, it would have been amazing to see the numbers. So just the sheer groups that want to talk to you, and the information that's being thrown at you, and the different, you're bouncing from healthcare to criminal justice issues to natural resources,
it's
water
a diverse
issues.
list.
I mean, you're just constantly changing topics over and over and over, because we don't have a big staff. I mean, it's the representative, myself, and then we have a legislative director. So, and that's it. And then we had 2 unpaid interns. So we don't have a huge staff. So we've got to be very diversified in our knowledge base.
How do you put a staff together to staff an office in Austin? How's that done? What's the process?
Well, the way I came with Dwayne from the campaign. He approached me actually at our county convention in October of 2013, and I thought he was going to ask me to vote for him, and he asked me to be his campaign manager. So,
and I bet he did ask you to vote for him.
So that was a little different, but we met, and I was like, can I think about this? Because we were in front of 400 people, and. But we met and talked, and of course I'd known him through Farm Bureau, and so I joined on with his campaign, and so I'd been with him since October 2013, and then it was just a no-brainer. I wouldn't let him talk about it until after we won the primary runoff, when we knew we were actually going to go to Austin, and that next day he kidnapped me, and we were cutting down 4x8s off a barbed wire fence in a bar ditch, and he said, "Well, you going to Austin with me?" I said, "Guess so."
Well, campaigns are fun, aren't they?
Yeah. So, but no, then we had a lot of support throughout all the campaigns, and it's funny. It's a small world. I mean, Austin's a big town, but it's a small world, and as soon as you're an incoming freshman legislator, you start getting resumes just thrown at you. Right. So we came and utilized the State Farm Bureau offices and interviewed a lot of people, and made that decision. So.
And Billy, you're part of that turnstile group, aren't you?
We are.
That's in and out and representing Texas Farm Bureau.
Actually, I had space leased out in their office.
Very good.
So, I have my chair in their office.
He has a permanent indentation in one of the chairs in the office.
So when they look up, they expect you to be there, in other words.
Yes.
When the session's going on, and obviously they're, like, how many bills did we file? Like, was it 6,000?
It was over 6,000.
Over 6,000.
Plus all the resolutions and everything.
And you weed through that process, and obviously people have got to look at those. And Billy, do you sit and go through those, go through every one of them, you and the rest of the staff? How does that work?
We do. I mean, it's changed a lot. Whenever I first went to work at the Capitol in 1993, we didn't have the technology that Joy and them have today, even. But we actually subscribe to a computer service where we're actually able to set up searches for the laws and the topics that we care about to help sort of filter that a little bit. But you all know your policy book, and there's lots of stuff in it. So there's lots of stuff we're interested in.
Don't leave home without it.
Don't leave home without it. And some of the ag groups like cattle raisers and stuff, they focus on maybe just 2 or 3 issue areas. Right. In Farm Bureau, we focus on almost all the issue areas, because our members care about not just the farm and ranch issues, but the issues that affect them in their daily lives. And we've got policy on it. If we've got policy on it, then we're gonna make sure we pay attention to those bills. And if we have a position, we had a discussion in our office. Pre-K was a big issue for Governor Abbott going into the session. Well, we have policy on pre-K, And, you know, we had the discussion as a staff, when these bills come up, do we need to go to committee and actually testify on pre-K bills as the Texas Farm Bureau? You know, what do we need to do? So,
and you wouldn't expect Texas Farm Bureau for that to be an issue that would be on the forefront.
Right, and we just explain to people, we're not just really a farm and ranch organization, we are a rural Texas organization. And that's why we have policy on all these different things.
Absolutely. Then the wheels begin to turn, and you contact, obviously, the members of Texas Farm Bureau when they need to go to work on something, then you get the wheels turning.
Yeah, we try to hold off on doing those action alerts, and Joy can talk about, you know, she's gotten lots of action alerts from lots of different groups this session, but, you know, we try to save the action alerts for the really important stuff, because we understand that they are getting these things from all sorts of groups. And so whenever Texas Farm Bureau decides to do a statewide action alert, we want it to have the biggest impact it can possibly have.
Absolutely. Joy, what were some of the big issues going into the session that you and the state representative were interested in? What was your office focused on as we move forward?
Well, and, you know, Dwayne talked about it earlier, but we are, both of us coming from an agricultural background, we were big on private property rights. And that's something that we both have had to deal with personally and feel very strongly about. But then there was also the issue that, you know, just being on the campaign trail, you couldn't help, but open carry was one of those too. That was a big issue. And once we got our committee assignments, Dwayne was placed on Homeland Security and Public Safety, which put him in the middle of the open carry debate. And then the other one was Natural Resources, and he was the only freshman member to be assigned to Natural Resources. So we felt very fortunate for that committee assignment. But that put us in the middle of the water discussion. So we were on two very powerful committees, and then just trying to apply that private property rights principle to the groundwater debate and some of the bills that were coming forward in there. So,
when the session is going on, even before the session, the pre-session, we begin to see bills filed. We begin to get some ideas about what might be coming up, and we need to contact our state representative. What are the good way to do that? How can people in Texas Farm Bureau be more involved and more effective in communicating with your office and their state representative? Have you got some tips on how we can do that?
You know, I think email is great because, you know, there are those times where you may want to talk to me and you know, obviously, yes, pick up the phone. But lots of times we're in a meeting and can't be reached directly on the phone. So, and then we've got a part of the, I guess, suite of systems that we use. We have a program that's called CMS, or the Constituent Management System. And we put every contact. So every time we get an email, every phone call, anytime anyone comes in, any letter that's sent in, we put that contact into that database. And then legislative.
You mean you don't just hit the delete button and
no.
Well, their office doesn't.
Yeah, our office doesn't. Dwayne believes that everyone should get a return letter back. So if they reach out to us, then we're going to send them a letter back, and that eats up a lot of letterhead and postage, but that's, he thinks that that's important. So anyways, what I was going to say is that contact there, he has a legislative council developed this new program where he can pull up on his laptop on the House floor that's called Cap Central. And in the bottom corner of that, whatever bill that they're debating on the floor, he's got a bar, and it says, and it's, you know, so many greens and so many reds, and says how many constituents. It pulls all the information from that CMS database and shows, you know, 50 people emailed, called, wrote in for this bill, and 3 against.
And it makes a difference.
So he's going to be, you know, have a stronger tendency to vote for that bill because he's got that scorecard right there in front of him.
See, they're friends, you can make a difference. It is important, and it does matter.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that you brought up the email deal, because there was a time when we thought that if you didn't send a formal letter, that it wouldn't get noticed. And now email is a good tool for us.
Oh, email's great because, you know, everything has gone electronic. So if I've got that email, then a lot of that information is pre-populated in there, and we can just easily convert that over to our CMS database and shoot you your response out. So
When you go to Austin when the legislative session is on, and I've been several times, and you see these guys running between committee meetings and meetings up and down the hall and talking on 2 cell phones, and you get a staffer following. It's not always possible to get the ear of your state representative. They're very busy.
Oh yeah.
But staff can be your best friend, I would bet.
Oh yeah, you know, it's my job to make sure. Well, I handle Dwayne's schedule as well, and so I usually have him, you know, stacked up just as thick as I can on meetings, and it's my job to make sure that he gets from point A to point B, and where he's supposed to be, and in, you know, in the hearings and listening to the debate on the bills, or on the House floor, or meeting with a constituent if they happen to come down to Austin, because those are the people that got us here. And so, you know, his schedule is very tight. Mine is too, but that's my job, is to, you know, meet with those people. And when he can't, he's always like, call Joy, you know, go talk to Joy. So, yeah, I mean, you've got to utilize staff, because you can't always get the legislator's ear, and that's just the nature of the job.
It's the nature of it. It's just impossible to be everywhere and do all the things that are required. It's extremely hectic. But let's talk a little bit about building a relationship with your state senator and your state representative. And we feel like that's so important to get acquainted with them when they're at home and in the district. And prior to the hustle and bustle of the session, and I would assume that certainly you would be in favor of developing that relationship, getting to know your state representative and state senator when they're home, and they do come home from time to time.
Absolutely, we're home right now. Yeah. So you know, again, this being our first session, we've just opened up a district office there in Cleburne, which is Dwayne's hometown, and then I'm Grandview, so I'm 15 miles away. So I think I can get there faster than I could get to the Capitol in Austin from where I was living. So the commute's a little different, but you know, you absolutely 100% develop those relationships, because their schedule is not as strenuous right now, and they've got time to sit there and talk to you. And in all honesty, this is the time when we actually need to be working on language and bill ideas, and if we need to think about, you know, trying to draft up some legislation to do something, because by the time we hit session, I mean, it's already blowing and going, and you run out of time so fast. It's only 140 days every 2 years. And
we're starting on the next one now, really, as we move forward.
We'll start campaigning in September.
We've been very fortunate to have our state representative, in fact, a couple of them over the years, and our state senator come to our local Farm Bureau meeting and visit with us, and that's always a good contact to let them know who's there and what you're thinking, and I think it connects the organization, the Texas organization, with them a little bit, and we found them to be interested in doing that, and so don't be afraid to reach out.
Oh, not at all. I just scheduled a meeting with our office and Senator Birdwell's office with David Bevels, who's here today, who's the president of Bosque County Farm Bureau, and he's getting together Bosque, Johnson County, and Hill County Farm Bureaus, and they're going to cook us some steak, so we're going to come and talk to them.
Outstanding.
But yeah, we're going to do that in a couple of weeks, I think. And
good meal is always the way to get somebody.
That's a way to get us there. Always through our stomachs.
I think that's almost a Farm Bureau policy.
Absolutely.
As a matter of fact, we do well with that. The point from this whole session is that what you do in contacting these people matters. We come from an industry in rural Texas, farmers and ranchers, that we hardly ever wanted to venture out past our own fence row. We didn't necessarily see that there was any need to get involved in politics, to get involved in the process. That's not true today. And that's one thing that we've learned through Texas Farm Bureau, is that we've got to reach out, we've got to be involved. Your input is needed, and I would assume you need input on certain issues that come up, so that the state representative knows what's going on in the district.
We absolutely need it, and you know, it's been talked about before, but there were over 6,000 bills filed, and I know that Farm Bureau was there in January for the leadership conference, and I mean, that was probably one of my favorite days of the session, because I felt like it was Old Home Week, and everyone came by the office because they supported us so much, and it was wonderful. But That was before committee assignments.
Right.
That's before we see bills making their way through the process. And so, you know, it's hard for one person to keep up with over 6,000 bills. So I need the feedback to come in again and say, you know, the follow-up, hey, remember that bill we're interested in? That's going up to committee, you know, and we may not be on the committee, but we may know people that are and may go talk to them about it and have some influence there. So it's not just the one time of reaching out, it's the constant contact.
Could you see the Farm Bureau influence affecting any particular bills this last session?
Absolutely. Again, being on natural resources, and that was the committee that I covered for the representative, and so I was there firsthand. But one of the funniest instances was, well, there was a bill that Farm Bureau didn't particularly like, and Dwayne didn't particularly like, and so we had been working a lot on it, and there were two things. There was one that was, you know, people trying to say that Farm Bureau has lost its touch. They've lost their influence, they've lost their impact. However, we spent weeks meeting and talking and debating, trying to fix this bill so that Farm Bureau could get on board with it. So I thought that was a little contradiction there. And then secondly, sitting in the back room, and this is just where members and their staff can be in the back room.
Are these those smoke-filled back rooms we hear about?
No smoking in the Capitol now.
Okay.
So, but back there in the back room of the committee, there was an instance where some of the committee members were coming off and grabbing something to eat or grabbing a cup of coffee, and I just happened to be sitting back there. And so one of the members had his hand on the door fixing to walk back in and was like, man, I just wish y'all could get a bill out here where Farm Bureau wasn't on my rear end griping at me. So, you know.
So there's good things from a positive and a negative.
No.
standpoint.
I mean, that just goes to show that Farm Bureau's voice matters to these representatives.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like, come on, get me something where they're not griping at me, and let's work so that they can, you know, maybe not support it, but just be neutral on the bill so that I don't have so much backlash from all my constituents.
Yeah, tell them write better bills. You know, that would
agreed,
do it.
agreed.
We're going to have a few minutes for questions. If you want to make your way toward the microphone, our time is kind of winding down. It always moves along a little quicker than you want when you're engaged. Billy, anything that stands out in this last session that you were maybe most disappointed in, something that didn't happen, something that you see us working toward in the next session?
You know, I work quite a bit with Jason Skaggs, who's my counterpart with the Texas Cattle Raisers, particularly on these water issues. And probably the one theme that Jason and I kept coming back to this session is we seem to have been having problems with legislators that we felt we shouldn't be having a problem with, that they should clearly understand where our members are on these water issues, and it ought to have been a no-brainer for those folks to tell their colleagues, sorry, I can't support that. But instead, it was kind of like they were trying to pressure us to let them off the hook, so to speak. And we've had lots of conversations.
Maybe there's work for us to do.
And you know, I think we talked a lot about doing the work in the interim, because what is impactful for us as the Farm Bureau lobby team is that whenever we go into the office, I want them to know who I am, sure, of course, and I want them to know what issues I work on because I want them to view me as a resource. But when I walk into that office, I want them to, when I say I'm with Texas Farm Bureau, I want them to think about the leaders back home that they know. I want them to associate me with their leadership at home, who are their constituents and who vote for them and who support them. Because that's what really makes the impact when I walk into the office and I say, here's where we are on this bill. And that's what that legislator was talking about. That's what he was talking about, is because he knew that if he didn't do what we wanted him to do, I was going to go back and tell his local folks, and then his local folks were going to be asking him, why did you do that?
Absolutely. Do we have any questions from the floor or comments? Got one in the back? Go right ahead.
Robert Atwood from Taylor County. Want to speak in regard to eminent domain. I know we've talked a lot about water this morning, and this is probably directed towards Billy. Having been with this group in Austin at the Capitol in January, and then again a repeat trip with Farm Lead in April, what I heard about eminent domain was positive, and we had some legislation going through, and then it fell short of getting passed. And when you hear what's happening in Austin, and then you go back out to the country and you look through the private landowner's lens, you see a little bit different story. And I'm speaking because I've got a second pipeline in 18 months coming through a piece of property. I've got a JLU study coming from the city of Abilene that's threatening to take property rights away. So, Billy, my question is, what can we do next time to make sure that we get the protections that this eminent domain legislature would provide to us?
Well, we have to start that conversation now, first of all. Every time your state legislator meets with you, sees you, you have to bring up eminent domain, every single time. They need, to the point to where they know before they even shake your hand that you're going to ask them about the eminent domain bill and whether or not they're going to get it passed next time. The second thing that is absolutely critical is anybody like Mr. Atwood who has a personal story, we need those folks to start telling those stories. Because when you're dealing with eminent domain, we are going up against the oil and gas industry, the utility industry, the cities, not so much the counties. The counties aren't usually quite as bad, but any entity that has eminent domain authority in the state of Texas, and there are thousands and thousands of them. The way we beat them on eminent domain is we have that legislator has to make the choice. They have to make the choice between supporting landowners who are not being dealt with fairly, who are not receiving fair compensation, and these entities that are abusing the power that the legislature gave them. Because the legislature has to give them the power of eminent domain. So you gave them this power, it's your job to make sure that they're using it correctly and not running over us. And that's what it's going to take. Because I guarantee you this attorney's fees thing is, if we're able to get that done next session, it is going to take a monumental effort to get it done. Because they absolutely have drawn the line in the sand, and there's not really a compromise position on that issue. There is no compromise. If you offer me X amount of dollars and the court says that you lowballed me by awarding me more than 20% above what you offered me, you got to pay my attorney's fees. They don't want to do that. They don't want to do it.
One more question. Anybody? Joy, Billy, we appreciate you so much spending some time with us this morning, and I can't leave here without putting in a word, Billy, for the great job that the group in Austin does with their campaign school that they have from time to time. I've been through it twice.
She went through it.
Yeah,
I've been through it.
Very informative. I'm telling you, if you're going to run for school board, city council, county commissioner, or you're going to run for the governor of Texas, you need to be in that campaign school. It is absolutely excellent. And they do such a great job, and they put you through the ringer, and they actually put you in campaign and interview situations where you've got to perform, and you'll be so much better prepared. We need Texas Farm Bureau members involved in the political process. We need your expertise, not only to visit with your state representative, to work with the Austin team when it comes time to lobby for a bill, but we need you involved in the political process, and I would encourage you to do it. If you say, well, I don't know anything about that, go to that school when they have it. You'll like it, and it will be a very, very rewarding experience. So I'm glad that that's available, and I just didn't want anybody to not know that was going on and know that it was available to people. There are future leaders in this room, and we need to develop them, and we need to continue to tell the story of Texas Farm Bureau. We appreciate all of our panel members today, and nobody's had more fun than I have the last few hours of visiting about the legislative process and the way our government works. Friends, there will be a lot of people that will go to bed tonight and not be hungry because of what you do. You're important. Keep it up. Thank you very much.